Gentleman from California reserves. Gentleman from Kentucky is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the Majority Leader, the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise.
The Majority Leader is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank my friend from Kentucky for yielding. Mr. Speaker, a little over a week ago, America witnessed a horrific act of political violence that goes against everything the United States stands for. On June 14th, a deranged murderer disguised himself as a police officer to gain entry into the home of Minnesota State Senator John Hoffman. He shot the senator and his wife, Yvette, a combined total of 17 times as Yvette shielded her daughter, Hope, who then called 911. Thankfully, Yvette Hoffman has been released from the hospital, while John remains in serious but stable condition, and he remains in our prayers. The killer, still disguised as a law enforcement officer, then stopped at the homes of 2 other Minnesota lawmakers, one whom was fortunately not home, and the other who was perhaps saved by a timely law enforcement intervention. He later arrived at the home of Minnesota State House Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and assassinated her and her husband, Mark Hortman. Law enforcement then led a 2-day manhunt before capturing the killer and finding a list of more than 45 lawmakers and potential targets. As someone who's experienced political violence firsthand, this brings back a lot of emotions. The man who shot me on the ball field that day also had a list of lawmakers. I'm grateful for the actions of the brave law enforcement officers who ran towards the danger and saved lives on the ball field that day and saved, no doubt, many lives in Minnesota on that day just a few days ago. This was a methodically planned attack on the people's right to be governed by their duly elected representatives and should be universally condemned, Mr. Speaker. America's differences must be resolved through debate and democracy, not through violence. The resolution we're voting on today denounces these disturbing and anti-American attacks and mourns the tragic loss of Melissa and Mark Hortman. H.Res. 519 by Ms. Morrison of Minnesota unequivocally condemns the horrific attacks on Minnesota lawmakers and their families in Brooklyn Park and Champlin, Minnesota, and calls for the rejection of political violence in Minnesota and throughout the United States. Political violence will never have a place in America. Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle must unite to reject political violence in all forms across the country. Melissa Hortman was a dedicated public servant, and we join Minnesota and the nation in honoring her life and the life of her husband, Mark. We also pray for the speedy recovery of John and Yvette Hoffman, and for peace and unity in the face of tragedy and division. With that, I urge adoption, Mr. Speaker, and yield back the balance of my time.